Hi, I'm Donna Jordan from Jordan Fabrics. As quilters, we always have scraps. Today I'm going to show you how to use up the scraps that you generate when you're cutting out your quilts. You may have seen our video where we made this fun project. This matches a quilt that we made. These were the scraps from the Hip to Be Square quilt. All of these pieces I got when I cut out all of my strips here. So this actually could go in the same room as this quilt. It's always fun to make something with the scraps. Luckily, Matt is always cutting. So I have a lot of scraps that I can always find. So let's go see what he's cutting today and we'll start a quilt. Hey Matt.
Hey Don, how's it going?
Pretty good, thanks.
Good, excellent.
This is where we keep our scraps. These are actually scraps from a quilt I made recently. All of these scraps came when I made this stacks quilt. I don't have a lot of big scraps, they're mostly little, and some of them are the ends of strip units. And I can't make a whole quilt, but I bet I can make a really fun pillow to match my quilt. So let's take these down to the workroom and get started. Now, if you're following along at home, you may not have scraps that are all the same color. It doesn't matter. Just get the scraps that you have. Get a lot of strips. You can get a coordinated group of colors, but if you don't have them, it'll just be scrappy looking. So it doesn't have to match one of the quilts you made. Just get a nice group of strips and we will put those aside. And so I've got these are stitched pieces. You don't have to have those. We just want the strips right now. Now the method I'm going to use to make the pillow is called foundation piecing. So I need a piece of fabric to use as a foundation. I'm going to use a solid light because some of my scraps are very light. This is not going to show at all, so it really doesn't matter what you use, unless, like me, you've got these really light prints. And if I used light solids, if I used a print here, it might show through some of these pieces. So I'm going to cut an 18-inch square out of this. I'm going to use an 18-inch piece of fabric here because I want to make a 16-inch pillow, and I want my foundation to be a little bit bigger. And after we get it all pieced, we will trim it down a little bit. Then we can finish the pillow. I have two distinct colors of scraps here. You may have a nice variety of colors. If you have 2 colors or 3 colors, you can do this pillow in sections. So I am going to do a section of light here with blues on both sides, but I could just alternate them and mix them up. So we're going to start in the middle, and I'm going to put a line. It doesn't have to be straight. I mean, it should be straight, but it doesn't have to be exactly in the middle. I'm just going to put a line somewhere near the middle here and do one chalk mark there so that I can start my patchwork there and I have a straight line to go on. This scrap project is really fun because it's kind of free form. There's no real rules, so we can just make it up as we go and have a lot of fun stitching all these fun scraps together. So I'm going to put this next to me. I'm going to get my foundation here, and I'm going to take a light scrap. If your scraps are really, really crooked on the edges, I suppose you could straighten them up, but I'm just going to ignore that. So mine are pretty straight. That's why I drew a line here. I'm going to put this on the line, and then I'm just going to grab another piece at random here. This is a real little one, and I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam and stitch these together and stitch right through the foundation. You want to put right sides together, and you want to make sure that your strips are longer than your foundation. If they're not, it's okay. We can piece it together to make it longer. So I'm just going to stitch these two all the way down and keep this one on the line. And don't stretch anything. Make sure they're just laying on top of the background. Just stitch all the way off the edge. You can curve your stitching there and leave those tails so it doesn't matter that that's extra long. Now we are going to finger press this to one side. And now we're going to add another piece. So even though this is not the same width all the way down, that's okay. I want them random widths. So now we're going to get another print or another solid that we haven't used. We're going to add this one. We're also going to finger press this one open. And now you're starting to see we're going to get random widths of strips here. This is the basic method we're going to use on the whole pillow. But to spice it up a little bit, we are going to put a seam. We're going to use 2 different fabrics in some of these strips. And this is what you'll need to do if your strips are not as long as your foundation here. Say your strip was only this long, you're going to have to add a piece. So let's get some pieces that are about the same width. And we're going to stitch them together. And you can either do a straight seam, so you get that, or to make it a little more fun, let's put a diagonal seam in here. So we'll trim off the extra seam allowance here. I think I can do it with my snips. And then press that open. So now we're going to have a pieced strip that has a nice diagonal seam in it. So I'm just going to put this here right on top of this guy and stitch down. Now if you have a real long piece like on this here, you can cut this off and put it back with your other scraps because we can probably use a piece that's that size. We'll finger press this open again, and you can stop and iron every so often. If you get 3 or 4 strips on, you want to take it to the ironing board, it'll lay nice and flat. So I'm going to add a couple more lights, and then I'm going to switch and add blues. Then I'm going to turn the whole pillow around, add a few lights here, and then switch to blues. And I'm going to keep putting some of them in with seams. I might even make some with a little darker piece in the middle. The idea is to have fun and make it random and not straight. Now, if most of your strips are the same width all the way down, you want to make them look more crooked. So I don't want all of mine to be exact widths. I want them to vary. So here's how you make it look crooked. We're going to take this and we're going to set it on there at an angle. And we're going to stitch right down here, and then we're going to cut off that extra blue, and then the blue will look nice and crooked. There, that's what we want. We want that piece to go from small to big. Now in a case like this, where you've got a much lighter print over the dark here, you're probably going to want to trim away this extra seam allowance if it's going to show through, and I think it will, so I'm going to trim that off. If it didn't show through, I wouldn't even trim, I would just leave it. Now if you have some patchwork left over, like I have some strip unit ends of the strip units here, you can sew this into a row and sew that on. If you don't have any of that, it's okay. You can make some patchwork. So I made a little row here just using my strips. The idea is to keep it unstructured, keep it crooked, keep it fun, and not be too concerned about what goes where. So I'm going to finish blues on this end, put a few more creams here, and blues on that end, and I'm going to cover up all of the foundation. I have the entire foundation fabric all covered, and you can see sometimes it distorts a little because we're sewing a lot of little strips on it, but that's okay. We're going to trim it down, and now I made it a little bit extra large, so I think I would like to trim it to 17 inches. Now I'm going to put the back on the pillow. You could quilt this if you like. It's already got quite a bit of body because it has the foundation and there's a lot of seam allowances in it. So it's pretty stiff already, so I'm not going to quilt it. I'm just going to put the back on it. I'm going to do an envelope style back on the pillow. So I used 2 pieces, and we're going to put this onto the pillow, and we'll be able to reach in and stuff that pillow form in there. These are just some other scrap pieces that I had that happened to match, and I thought I might do a little decorative band on here. I just folded it in half and stitched it along one edge, and then that's the selvage edge there. Take this half of the back and put it a little bit lower than halfway down the pillow. Then take this half, and we want to overlap about 4 or 5 inches. So I'm just overlapping that part there. I'm going to put a few pins around here to hold everything together. Now we're just going to stitch about 3/8 of an inch in from the edge. Now we're just going to trim off this excess backing and the excess bulk in the corners, and we're going to go all the way around the pillow and do that. Now all we have to do is flip this right side out, so we can reach in there, reach in here, and then I'm going to poke out those corners and flatten it out a little bit, and we will be ready to stuff it. What a fun pillow this was to make. It's nice and abstract. I love how the lines are not all parallel and all the pieces are different sizes. It's a great way to use up the scraps. Now this happens to match the quilt here. So this would look really nice on the quilt or in the same room, but I think I'm actually going to use it on my couch. I just like all these colors. Now the back, again, we used scraps for the back, and it's got that little band on it there. And this is how you put the pillow in. You just put the pillow in hard, and that's why you want a lot of overlap here so that this flap will stay closed nice. So really fun way to use up your scraps. And this happens to be solids, but I can see this same kind of pillow in batiks or even in old-fashioned Civil War prints. Many different kinds of prints would look really nice in this pillow. We hope you enjoyed watching our tutorial today on how to make a scrappy pillow. Happy quilting!